welcome everybody to our international webinar on COVID-19, organized in cooperation with our SureFarm project partners that are Miranda Meuwissen from Wageningen University and Research, Bárbara Soriano from Technical University of Madrid, Gordana Manevska-Tasevska from Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, Franziska Appel from Leibniz Institute of Agricultural Development in Transitional Economies, IAMO, and Camelia Gavrilescu from Institute of Agricultural Economics of Romanian Academy. So today's presentations are focused on those countries, Spain, Sweden, Germany, Romania, and Poland. But in the project, we have more than 6 countries, of course, and Miranda, I'm sure, will refer to all of them in her summary. But this selection of countries for this webinar was dictated by curiosity, stemming from this observation that the countries adopted very different approaches to pandemic. So we've heard about quite relaxed approach of Sweden at first, very strict afterwards Spain restrictions, and Germany is interesting because it's our neighbor and old EU member country, and Poland and Romania are interesting because they are new member state countries. So this is the short explanation of the selection of the countries that we thought may be interesting for you. Probably most of you already participated, if not in one or maybe even more than one event on COVID. There are so many papers and so many seminars on this issue. So I was thinking how to make it interesting to you, what can be interesting in our seminar. And I think what we can offer that is maybe distinguished is that we present this, we have this ambition to present this problem of pandemic in reference to strong theoretical background that is within some framework of research on resilience and on system thinking. So to put it in a structured way, to study the COVID topic in a structured way with reference to theoretical background and framework. So the structure of our webinar is so that Miranda Meuwissen, who is the leader of SureFarm project, Horizon 2020 project, she will start with the explanation what is the resilience thinking in SureFarm project and how it relates to the studies on COVID situation. Then we will listen to individual country presentations focusing on resilience in COVID of different farming systems. And then Miranda will summarize the results of our research on COVID, which will be also the paper published in Agricultural Systems, special issue on COVID. Before we start, just a few technical issues. Please switch off the microphones, but I think cameras are fine because we are missing our faces, but this is your choice. Of course, the presenter is asked to have the camera on, and please ask questions on chat. If they are particular to certain presenter, you may put @ and the name. You have all the names on agenda. And if it's a general question, just put it as a general question. So I think that's it from the introduction. And please, Miranda, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kasia, for the introduction. I see a lot of your colleagues, I think, joining, at least that's what I derive from the names. Let me start sharing my screen.
Yes, please.
So can you confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, Miranda, it's very good.
Super. Well, it's Introduction to Resilient Thinking in the SureFarm project, and the whole consortium is contributing to this. So that is what we have on this first slide. Well, that's a mouthful. So what is actually resilience? Some people say it's a buzzword. Well, we with the consortium do not agree, because it's not a buzzword at all. It has a clear definition. So resilience is about dealing with shocks and stresses. That's what we all know. So let's look at a figure that's often more helpful than a lot of words. So that's on the next slide. Building resilience in farming systems. So let's first look at these orange blocks. Often when we talk about shocks and stresses, like droughts, like price shocks, new regulations, we immediately jump to that other orange block, the functions. What does it do with income? What does it do with the food provision, for instance, in case of the COVID lockdowns? So that is often what we see. We go from the one orange block, we jump right away to, okay, what does it mean? In SureFarm, we try to look a bit deeper. And that is what our resilience definition also illustrated. More specifically, we look to these bluish blocks, or grayish. I'm not so sure how they appear on your screen. And these are the resilience attributes, capacities and actions. And I'm sure that all the presenters today hint at part of these blue blocks as well. So let's look to these resilience actions. So they are over here in the middle. So often, well, if we think about resilience, we talk about this coping. So coping with a shock. For instance, when there is a drought, maybe you bought insurance, and that is a typical coping strategy. Or in case of the COVID crisis, maybe you got an extra loan facility from your bank. Well, that's also coping. But there is more to say about resilience. There is also, maybe you could anticipate. That's where the mouse goes. The anticipation. For instance, in COVID, we also saw that there was some anticipation going on in Belgium to anticipate, well, maybe this Chinese crisis comes to our country as well, and let's anticipate a bit. So that was, well, that was a good example. We didn't see so much of this anticipation, but that is also part of dealing with shocks and stresses. And of course, there is this big big block of actions like responding actions, a bit of adaptation, maybe even transition that you can go into as part of dealing with the shock and stress. And adaptation, you could think of, you can have an example of the COVID crisis, switching from your normal sales patterns to going into online sales, for instance. That's wow, that was quite adaptive in a number of farming systems. So these actions, we'll see them in all the presentations. So a lot of coping, some responding, a bit of anticipation. How do these actions, or where do they come from? We make the argument that there's these different capacities that go with them. Anticipating, coping, responsive capacities. If you have the capacity to cope, for instance, you have that infrastructure for insurance. If you have the infrastructure for cooperatives, for instance, if these capacities are there, then the actions are possible. There's even one more step deeper, which is these attributes. And also they come back today, but not so visible, I expect, because these are very structural characteristics of our farming systems. How diverse are they? How open are they? Is there a good level of profitability? And we argue that if all these attributes, we have a long list of 13, if they are all well organized, the rest goes much easier, let's say like that. So that's these blue blocks are the theory, the systematic approach that Casia just referred to. So we try not to only look at these orange blocks, but also at the deeper driving factors, and that is in these blue blocks. Moreover, we do that not only for the farming system, that is that yellow block, but we also try to understand, okay, what is the role of the enabling environment? And that's the other yellow block. So this is the structure that Casia just referred to, and that we try to understand for a number of shocks, but also we try to understand how is all this going in terms of the COVID crisis. And as we argue that these capacities, these coping and responding capacities are different in different areas of Europe, we understand these shocks and stresses and also the COVID situation in the context of the farming system. Because if I look to the sheep farmers in Spain, for instance, they have a different way of working than the quite cooperative, but different, for instance, than from the potato farmers, who are also quite cooperative, but there's some differences there in the Netherlands, for instance. And then there is a Romania case study where Camelia and her colleagues say, well, cooperation is always a bit difficult. Historically, that's not exactly what we are used to, and we don't like that so much. So there's all these differences that we try to incorporate in our analysis and in our understanding of these attributes and capacities. So the own context is very important. So therefore, we have these 11 case studies across Europe. Different areas, different historical context, different weather. Well, a lot of differences actually. We have a number of findings already because the project started in 2017, and we have done this systematic analysis for a number of methods and a number of years already. Well, and we find a lot of things. Among others, this 3, you could say, quite negative or quite a bit pessimistic messages. That the current resilience is fairly poor. Many farming systems are struggling. And in other parts of the work, we find that many farming systems are actually close to reaching critical thresholds, meaning that if there is more of a challenge happening, the system cannot deal with it anymore. Or if there is even less levels of these attributes, cooperation, diversity, that's not working anymore. So these 3 findings, you could say, are, well, alarming, especially if yet another crisis showed up, being COVID-19 and all these lockdowns everywhere. So the next slide is much more positive. So there are reasons for optimism. Definitely, that's also what we find. And I have 2 bullets here. There is much spirit for change. And we see that with policymakers at farm level, we see it. We see this spirit. It's not so easy to move into it and to realize it, but we see a lot of spirit for change. And the second bullet is a bit more text, sorry for that. But we see that the systematic approach that Casia introduced in her introduction, it helps. You think that we do not only try to understand these orange blocks, that we had shock and what does it do with income and food, but that we build on these fundamental building blocks, that blue parts that you saw. And through that systematic analysis of these blue blocks, these resilience attributes, capacities, and actions, we see that that there are a few priority areas to go further and to well, the next slide was, of the previous slide was a bit pessimistic, but to think more into these optimistic directions. And the two main messages that we get from that is, on the left hand side, we need investment in resilience attributes. It's easily said, but difficult to do. And we all realize that, but we all see that it's so important. And we need, on the right-hand side, this much long-term vision instead of the very volatile, fluctuating regulations that we have. So, Kasia, how am I doing with the time?
It's just about to go to the end.
Okay, that's good, because it's the last slide. The next slides show the names of all the institutions and where you can find our website. So I would like to end with this slide, because these two elements at the bottom, well, they are so fundamental, yet also very hard to realize. Yeah, that is, let me end with that, and let's learn from the COVID responses in the different areas. And I'll come back to these two symbols when I go again to my presentation. So thanks for this. I hope that it gives a bit more, that it gives structure to the next presentations, so that we see a bit where to place the next presentations in our systematic approach, as Kasia nicely introduced it. So thanks for your attention, and I hope that yeah, we can come back to these difficult things at the bottom of this slide. Okay, floor is to the next speaker. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Miranda. Yes, the next speaker will be Bárbara. She will tell us about the research on COVID in Spain. So Bárbara, start your presentation from your computer. So
Okay,
as Miranda said, we will now go from one agricultural system to the other, so across countries and across sectors. And we will see the differences, and at the end we will wrap up again referring to resilience framework. Okay, I see your presentation, so I think it's downloaded fine. You can go on. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Kasia. Thank you very much for the Institute of Rural and Agricultural Development for organizing this seminar on resilience of European agricultural system in times of COVID. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present our results on our case study. Let me start my presentation by telling you about our case study. We've been studying the resilience of the extensive sheep farming system in Huesca, in the northeast of Spain. It has 500,000 sheep heads and almost 1,000 farms dedicated to lamb meat production. They are mainly farms that are family business, diversified with other crops like almond orchards, olive trees, cereal crops, and vineyards. From our resilience assessment, in the past resilience assessment, what we found is that our case study is almost in collapse. This is showing that the sector was not able to cope with the challenges that are affecting the sector. There are many challenges affecting the sector. They are mainly related with long-term pressures, such as, you can see here, decreasing national land meat consumption, the increasing competence to access to land, and also the worsening attractiveness of the shepherding, because this is an activity that is really low profitability. It provides low profitability, is really intense in workload, and also it receives very low public support. In the farmers have to live in remote rural areas with no public services. So, in view of this situation, COVID-19 came up, impact again the system. And how did the COVID impact the system? the main impact was through the HoReCa channel, because here in Spain, the main channel to consume this kind of meat is through the restaurants and hotels, as we usually eat this kind of meat in special days. So the first impact was that there was a market oversupply, and suddenly the prices experienced a very sharp drop. In just 2 weeks, the prices fell almost 50%. Then there were more bottlenecks in the value chain, because feedlots were unable to continue buying lambs because they were at maximum capacity. Also, the slaughterhouses, they weren't able to continue slaughtering, and also they weren't able to continue buying lambs to feed them. So here we found a very important bottlenecks in the value chain, and also the regional markets that were in charge of fixing these prices of references of the lamb meat, they failed. So there were a lot of speculations regarding the prices of lamb meat, and there was a very important lack of transparency in how the prices were formed. So the actors in the farming system, they react. As Miranda said, there are many different actions reacting a shock in the system. Here is our farming system. Here you can find here the main actors with mutual dependence, the farmers, and the other actors with mutual dependence with farmers. And let me share with you some of the key actions performed by the actors in the farming system. First, the farmers were forced to keep longer the sheep in farms because they were not able to sell them. So this implied to increase their costs, feeding costs. So they had to use their earnings, their savings on. They have to invest their savings in this increased feeding costs. Some of them, they start with online sales and trying to be more active in social media. So they receive an important support from their families. They played also important roles, and also the feed suppliers, because the feed suppliers, they weren't used to have such a demand from the sheep sector for feed in the sheep sector. So they react very quickly, and they provide feed for farmers in the sheep sector. But the most important actions we found is actions from cooperatives, because they committed to buy the sheep, the lambs, to the farmers at fair prices, and also they conducted very effective campaign to boost the consumption at home. So and also to generate some public awareness about the difficulties of the sector. So these campaigns had a very good impact on consumption. And also they worked together with public administration, and they got two main actions, or they performed two main actions that help the system to deal with COVID. The first one is that cooperatives lobby the administration to get new trades with new countries to help the farmers to sell the oversupply, this oversupply in the markets. So we get new deals with Jordania and also with Saudi Arabia. And also they allowed to come in the shearers from Uruguay, that they are really expert in shearers, and we need them at that moment to come into Spain to share the herds. So it was a success, this collaboration between public and private companies. And also from public administrations, they approved two main aids. One of these was the private block of markets. So all these actions lead to positive impacts on the sector, and we can learn that the sector also has had or experienced positive impacts, mainly because all these actions are aligned with the long-term needs of the farming system. The actions of the farmers, of the other actors in the farming system, led to new trade deals, also increased public awareness, and also increased the consumption at home, and also reinforced the image of cooperativism. So we found that we can find positive impacts of the actions performed by the actors in the farming system. Here are, when we assess the resilience of the farming system against this shock of COVID, we also ask us about which resilience attributes were present when the farming system was dealing with the COVID. As Miranda said before, there are many different resilience attributes, but we can assess them framed into the resilience principles: diversity, technique of feedbacks, system reserves, openness, and modularity. And we've seen that they were present. They were present with high moderate presence in the system that allow the system to be resilient, to cope with the COVID at the first weeks, during the first weeks of this crisis. They increased the diversity of the channels for distribution channels of the sector. Cooperation was key to deal with the COVID. The sector has had enough reserves, human capital, natural resources, sufficient earning to deal with the COVID. The sector proved their capacity to open to new markets, so there was a high presence of this capacity to open to new deals. And modularity, we see that the modularity it had low presence because the impact of prices affected the whole sector, every farmer, every different product, regardless the dependence on Horeca channel. So modularity, we think that it was low. It's low in our farming system. So conclusions, what are our thoughts for the future? So we know that as I start in my presentation, the situation is the farming system is close to collapse. So the problem is still there, and our farming system need to keep dealing with this lowering consumption and reduce profitability. But we learned from COVID, and we can find some actions for the future, priority to conduct in the future for reinforcing this resilience in the future. So, and this is in line with what Miranda said in her presentation, because we need to boost, to reinforce the resilience attributes of the farming system. We need to bring agriculture closer to consumer. We've seen that it's important to perform this awareness campaign and bring closer the extensive farming to consumers. We need to reinforce the cooperation between actors, because it's key to deal with. We've seen that it's key to deal with this kind of shocks. We need to support diversification, because again, we've seen that it's been key for dealing with this, and also to continue strengthening the international trade deals. That it's been one of the solutions, or one of the main ways the sector found to deal with COVID. So this is the very brief situation of our case study and how they deal with COVID. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bárbara. It was very good to see how many lessons were learned from this COVID situation, and also that there are positive sides of the COVID, because mostly we focus on negative sides, and but actually what's important is the net effect and net balance. Okay, so let's go to Swedish case. Gordana, the floor is yours. I see your presentation, but not in the presenting mode. Oh yes, now it will be, yeah, in the presenting mode. Yes, it works. Okay, 10 minutes. Please go on.
I had to unmute myself, of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So thank you, Kasia, for organizing this seminar. So nice to have these interactions during this dark days in Sweden, talking about the results that we have had so far, and especially this COVID situation that has been quite on the media around Europe about Sweden. Thank you all for all the others attending the seminar. I will be happy to answer all the questions that you have after the presentation too. It's not in presenting mode now, it's in presenting mode, yeah. Our case study is about high-value egg and broilers production in southern Sweden. Very short about the location of the case study area. It's, as it says in the title, south of Sweden, and it occupies like 1/3 of the country. But in practice, it means that it occupies 85% of the total agricultural area in the country, and also 85% of the businesses are there. It's the most fertile area in the country, and it's recognized for its intensive production. All the largest cities are also there. So what we see basically, yes, we have a market that is closed, but we also see that farms have to compete both for labor and for land. So it's not easy. In farms want to plan to expand or so, just to expand. It's limited resources. It's about high value egg and broiler production, mostly family farms, and the production is oriented for the domestic market. Just as an some figures, the self-sufficiency index for eggs in Sweden is 97%, and for broilers is 75%. And they're aiming for more, just they want to cover the whole market. It's important to mention that egg production in Sweden has banned for the other countries in Europe. It's basically banned for importing eggs that are not certified as salmonella-free. It's not required for the neighboring Nordic countries. General challenges of the sectors is the very high standards and the strict animal and welfare regulations. It's also health and environmental regulations. Also changing consumers' preferences towards these animal welfare, health and environmental regulations again. It requires technology adaptations. Farmers complain they do not really have time to pay for the technology that they have applied for the 10 years if the credit is for 20 years, let's say, for big investments. It also applies very high production costs, but also it requires additional knowledge, competence, and labor. So these are the general characteristics of the sector. When we talk about the COVID impact, I would like to mention that our analysis is based on information that we got from the media. And I have selected 2 citations for this presentation just to give you a feeling of what's going on or what we find in the media. The first is for the broiler production, and it says the production of broilers has increased more than other types of meat. Shorter rearing period provides flexibility to quick adaptation of the production to market demand, and that's from the Swedish Board of Agriculture in September. Similar discourse and similar sayings, we see over the summer and even at the beginning in the springtime when we did the analysis. And then from the Svenska Egg, it's a branch organization for eggs in Sweden, for egg production in Sweden, as it says. Egg sale has dramatically increased after COVID-19. And they say, if there are eggs at home, there is food. Like saying that, eggs are very much, demanded food product. Many people working at home, easy to do it, whatever. So they have seen a very, very high demand for eggs in the country after COVID. So just to summarize, what we see from COVID is very minor exposure from the COVID impact. That's primarily because Sweden did not implement lockdown. Sweden did not close the borders. It wasn't forbidden for companies to work. Although there were recommendations, and still there are recommendations for people to work at home and so, but not official lockdown in the country. As positive impact, we see that producers benefited from the disruptions for the import, although the country was not closed, other countries were closed. And the production is not export oriented, so the production was not affected in that way. Then we have very strong public awareness for buying domestic products. It was like that before, but now it's even stronger. And then we see movements for labor from other branches in the countries that were more affected. So labor moving from other branches into agriculture. Negative impact, some difficulties in food imports and access to migration labor, of course. Actors' role, very much oriented toward using of information and communication technology to find markets. Here it's about finding inputs, farmers and processors connecting with each other, but also connecting with the consumers, as Bárbara mentioned, like online sales, more active social media. I mean, it was very much about using information and communication technology. Not that much changing in the sector. It more or less like coping and finding ways to deal with the issues that they have to deal. And also it was about establishing contacts for hiring labor from companies that had shortage of work. And Swedish farmers organization helped a lot in that. The government, yes, there was financial support for severely affected farms and processors, but it wasn't only for agriculture, it was for all the companies in the country affected. So I cannot say that that's specific for the farming, but it was, yeah, for all companies. How we place the Swedish story within the Shared Farm Resilience framework, we see that COVID-19 has not affected the system severely, or it was very, very minor impact. However, we see that the farming system has coped with challenges. So among the other things I mentioned using of information and communication technologies for finding labor, for, as I said, finding inputs, contacting with buyers, consumers. Adaptation and transformation was not needed at this point. Then for the enabling environment, we had the government support, the financial support. Attributes, these are like the main three attributes: openness to do changes, diversification. Farmers tried to have own, not tried, but it was even before COVID, to have own production of fodder, so they can survive in times when it's needed. And also the communication was really important. And as said, a very minor impact at farm level with very few imbalances among the actors. Conclusions and thoughts for the future. Yeah, minor impact, awareness of the information communication technologies. But what came to be very important was the public awareness about the importance of the Swedish food system in general. A lot of discussions about that the country has to build a system that is going to be self-sufficient in the future. and talking about the importance of that. Then discussions about the vulnerability of the system, how it is now, what can happen if another kind of virus or whatever come in the future. And of course, the possibilities and what kind of products we can continue producing in Sweden for being self-sufficient for food products in the future. So although we did not really see that much effects on the at farm system level when it comes to egg and broiler production, we see a lot of discussions about the food system in general in Sweden. Yeah, thank you so much. I think, yeah, that was the last slide.
Thank you, Gordana. That was very good presentation also. Yes, it was interesting to see this obvious correlation that lack of lockdown means freedom for economy. And that's what you showed with numbers and examples, but also that media was so much involved in this awareness building. And also that media was kind of showing this positive impact, while usually media wants to, make the story dramatic and so on. But here, like, media was a good player and kind of posing the situation in like building awareness and doing showing a positive side of this increased production and so on. Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
yeah. Especially, I would mention that branch organizations took a leading role at the beginning, like talking a lot. Yeah, we are self-sufficient. We can produce. We have the capacity. So, and even they were like overwhelmed from the extra demand of people asking for domestic products and talking. Now you see how important it is that we do not really depend on imported food. So it was, yeah, and then it's high quality. Not frozen. I mean, it's fresh and healthy, and it just builds up during the whole period. And this is where the whole discussion leads.
Yeah, very different press from what we were reading here on our countries. Okay, so we move to Germany now. I only can remind you that you can put your questions in the chat. It's fine to do this during presentations, but of course they all will be addressed at the end. So we don't answer them online. We will answer after the presentations. And we are very good with time, so let's keep on that. And Franziska, the floor is yours, please.
So I hope you all see my slides now.
Yes.
So we move to the German case study region. It's the Altmark region. So here you can see already from the picture from above that this is quite a large scale farming area with concentration on crop farming. So the German case study is large-scale corporate arable farms, but this area also have a quite high proportion of grassland. It's in the north of Saxony-Anhalt, so in East Germany. So in East Germany, we have much larger farms than on average in Germany. So because the farming system is quite still influenced by the farmer GDR type of agriculture. So we have quite large corporate farms and also small family farms, quite a lot smaller family farms, but from the production side, the most important are the large corporate ones. And even the family farms are not that small. The general problems of the Altmark are quite poor soils, quite sandy soils. So we have always a problem if there's not enough rainfall. And in the last years, it was really dramatic there. Also in the Altmark, there's a really low level of regional infrastructure and also a lack of skilled labor, especially for these larger corporate farms. They are heavily depending on workers. To sum up a bit the COVID-19 impact, so on the negative side, the concerns on the labor shortage are increased to COVID-19, especially when the borders were closed. The farms we interviewed had some issues with, for example, milkers from Poland, that we were not allowed to cross the borders in the beginning. There were a bit of problems with some fertilizers and pesticides, but this was like usually they order one day and the next day it arrives, and then there was just some days, weeks of longer period. Also, what we discovered in our interviews were the mental stress. So farmers were influenced by that. What happens if I get ill? What happens if my workers get sick? How we can deal with the farming when during the lockdown, the childcare, for example, was closed. On the positive side, we had an increase of some public awareness on the importance of agriculture. I think that's quite similar to Sweden. But later this turned when we had the first hotspots in slaughterhouses. So it was more like also the farming sector was then seen as a cause for the COVID-19 pandemic. But overall, we had quite a minor exposure. So the lockdown occurred after the seeding. So it was like in the middle of where not the farming was not that much influenced. And yeah, so there was also minor impact altogether. So let's come to the actors and what they did. So farmers had some anticipating, or maybe this is also their usual behavior, to early purchase seeds and fertilizer. So there were no problem with the delivery there. From the side of the employers, there was a high level of solidarity. So we got the case of one farm where some milkers have to work like 7 days per week during the first weeks of the lockdown, because other milkers were not have to stay at home with their kids because the childcare was closed. And so there was a lot of solidarity. Farmers and employers have, of course, organized like the childcare, for example. And this is we see as a kind of coping. I think most of what was done was part of coping. And the consultants and the association react in a way that they now are offering more online communication, online seminars for farmers. And also from what we get from the farmers, this is seen quite as a positive effect because it's time-saving. Here, just a small example of the coping, how to deal with the childcare. This is one of the farmers we interviewed, and she had a lot of days on the field having her kids with her on the machines. So this was one way. So from other actors' role, from the government, there were some financial supports for severely affected farms, but there were just maybe some minor farms that were really affected. And the German Farmers Union organized some flight for migrant workers. This was not that important for our case study region, but in other regions there were some concerns about the asparagus harvest, and so they organized light flights to get the workers in. Altogether, it's like limited agency because it was not very much needed. So how the COVID affects the resilience, the overall resilience in the Altmark. So we have quite a lot of existing problems of this farming region, like poor soils, increasing effects of droughts, high degree of bureaucracy, very low level of regional infrastructure, and the lack of skilled labor that is pushing the farming system, or putting some pressure on it. During COVID, we have this enabling environment, like the support of the Farmers Union and also from the government. And there are some resilience and capacities like this, anticipating or purchasing the seeds in time, or that helped a lot with reacting to the COVID pressure. So we can conclude that the existing problems are outweighed the challenges that were apparent during the COVID-19. So it doesn't add that much. So conclusion and thoughts on the future. There were, of course, some reflection of the society about food production and self-sufficiency. But as I already mentioned, this was quite short-lived, because otherwise later it was like the cause, or a driver of the agriculture was seen as a driver of the pandemic. Of course, labor shortage, the discussion intensified, especially among farmers that rely on labor force from other European countries, like Poland or Romania and Bulgaria. There were also an attempt on how, in which way could migrant labor be replaced, especially in the asparagus sector. There were some attempts, they tried, but they of course failed, because you also need a quite high qualification. You have to know what you're doing there. But yeah, there were like in the media some Germans that tried to harvest asparagus but couldn't manage. So there is an ongoing discussion in Germany on the bottleneck of slaughterhouse capacities. We're quite close to Halle. We have now a new hotspot in Weißensfels, where there's also a quite large slaughterhouse. As a consequence, the subcontracting of farm labor is prohibited in slaughterhouses. So there was even a change in the laws. Yeah, I would say that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Franziska. It was very nice to see, other than economic only aspects, also this childcare, social aspects. You mentioned also mental stress and other side effects of COVID, but also this realization that COVID was not the only problem, and even other problems, as you said, outweighed COVID problems. That it's also very interesting, because usually COVID is now the number one to blame for everything, but not the case of Germany. Okay, we will discuss later. So now, Camelia, the floor is yours. Let's see what happened in Romania. Then we have Polish case, and that will be the end of the country presentations.
Okay, let me try to share the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, this one. Share. And like that.
I don't see it yet, although it says yes, it's coming. All right.
Well, not exactly a very high-speed train. Okay.
You managed. Okay.
So thank you very much for inviting us to this webinar and providing us the opportunity to present some thoughts about what happened in the Romanian agricultural system, most specifically in the small mixed farming system that we are studying in the Shore Farm project. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues from the Economic and Social Research Institute in Iași, which is a center of the Northeast region, our region, our case study. Okay, so I'll start by, let me check the time. I'll start by sharing with you some characteristics of the farming system in the case study area. First, the fact that these small farms are really very many. I mean, in the case study area, there are almost 700,000 small farms, less than 10 hectares. Okay, their average area, 2.65 hectares. Out of these farms, 77% are mixed. You can see on the slide the various crops and livestock. Also, in the farming system, there are also farms producing vegetables, fruits, and vineyards. Some important characteristics are here represented, and in red I also put some challenges. The most important challenge that we identified during the studying our farming system was the poor integration of small farms in the agri-food chains. And as a, let's say, consequence, of course, poor access to EU markets, which is combined on the same time with important competition coming from the EU member states products coming on the Romanian market. Other important challenges are the chronicle lack, or let's say reluctance of farmers to cooperation and association. This comes from very bad memories in recent history, the last 50, 80 years history. Lack of availability of labor. Yes, a lack of labor, especially in the rural areas where due to the, let's say, perceived lack of opportunities, people which are belonging to the active working age are seeking better opportunities, either out of the rural area, and mean they're going to urban areas trying all sorts of jobs, or quite a lot of them are migrating in other countries. We heard Franziska saying about Romanian workers going in Germany either to work in farms or in slaughterhouses, but they go also to Spain, to Italy, and to United Kingdom. Okay, another important challenge is more recently, in terms of climate change, the increasing frequency of droughts. The problem is that to correct, let's say, that important investment in irrigation facilities are needed. For the moment, small farmers really cannot afford this kind of costs. On the other hand, for the next programming period, Romania planned important investment in in irrigation all over the country, wherever, of course, the landscape allows that. Last but not least, changing too frequent changes in rules and regulations. Now coming back to our COVID impact, there were some interesting developments, some of them rather unexpected. I'll start with the negative impacts, mainly lower sales of spring products and products for school programs, because all childcare and all schools and university were closed. Lower prices for vegetables and I don't know what's and milk and dairy products, reduced demand, especially because processors didn't want to buy any more from farmers milk, since at the other end mostly the demand from hotels, restaurants, and from this milk school program was completely interrupted. Important problem was reduced off-farm income. Many small mixed farms are relying on income coming from members of the families who are working abroad. At the beginning of the COVID, many people, many Romanians were forced to return home because they lost their jobs in the countries where they were working, either in farming or many of them in services, in hotels, restaurants, and so on. Something very important, closure of non-urban wet markets and fairs. I must say that one of the main channels for small farms to sell their products are these direct sales on wet markets, which are very popular in urban areas. Those ones were not closed during the lockdown. But the rural ones and the peri-urban wet markets were closed. So this posed an important problem to farmers who were used to go there. It posed also problems to consumers which were going to buy there. For retailers, of course, increased costs with protection measures. Very important major impact for agritourism, which was completely closed initially at the start of the lockdown, but also restaurants were not opened until 15th of July, something like that, and they incurred huge losses. On the bright side, farmers adapted rather quickly, especially those who were located rather closer to urban areas. So we saw a diversification of selling channels, an intensification of online sales for fresh vegetables, fruits, eggs, dairy products, multiplication of such short chains. We also saw some change in consumers' attitude, who started appreciating more local products. Okay, now I'll pass to actors' roles within the farming systems. I was telling you about the importance of this diversification of channels. They started selling online. They started entering social media and making for them web pages and so on. A problem linked with those seasonal workers that I was telling you about, those people who came at the beginning of lockdown, they came from abroad. Those who were residents of rural areas worked temporarily where they as long as they were obliged to remain in Romania on their own farms. But those one who came from those one who are living in urban areas, they prefer to stay home and get unemployment support, but they did not go to work in farms in agriculture, although there is an important demand for that. In terms of actors' roles outside the farming system, the government tried to offer some various types of financial support, payments for technical unemployment, which applied only to some farms which are registered as enterprises. But it was offered for all types of businesses, not only agriculture. Specific for agriculture, it was launched, the ministry launched a platform for online sales of vegetables to come to the support of those farmers who are producing fresh vegetables, but are not included in any kind of associations. And they are, as I was telling you, they're trying to sell only on wet markets. Also, in terms of credit, whoever had some credits was able to postpone the payment until the month of December. And something quite important, local authorities were obliged to shift to online working. I would say that I presented you the enabling environment, so support by government and banks. The system was able to cope quite well in terms of let's say robustness, because small farms are generally much more robust than larger one, and than farms which are larger and much more linked to the value chains. Sorry, we saw a lot of adaptability. This kind of immediate response of farmers who started to emphasize on direct sales and direct deliveries. So in my opinion, these challenges due to COVID-19 had a bright side and let's say dark side. The dark side was that they highlighted and aggravated some existing problems, but on the bright side, they provided opportunities for adaptation. And I was thinking about new channels, about development of ICT, increased presence of farmers, of small farmers, even on social media. And as conclusions, those existing problems that were highlighted, basically lack of cooperation and the poor insertion in value chains, lack of labor due to migration either to urban areas or to abroad, increased appreciation for local products. And here I would like to add just one single mention. Lately, I see on social media and sometimes, no, many times with the support from the research system and from consulting system, presence, or let's say, how to say, advertising of local small businesses, local farmers who are able to provide fresh products, or even processed products such as, I don't know, bread, bakery, fresh dairy, and so on. And this is something that I've seen quite an important development in the last I think 3, 4, 5 months. So this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Camelia. Thank you very much. Yeah, so good to see how COVID aggravates some problems, but on the other side gives a push to accelerate actually some processes which were already in place before. So yes, now let's move to Polish case. I will try to share my screen now. Is it coming? I think it's not coming, is it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Is it now?
Yes, it's working now.
Okay. Very good. Okay. So we move to Poland now. I'm presenting not only my work, but also of the whole department of economic modeling. And I would like to stress that the interviews were carried out by Piotr Gradziuk, Vitali Krupi, and Anna Martikainen, but the whole department was involved in this research. So we studied COVID situation in the horticulture farming system. So we focused on Central Eastern Poland, which specializes in this type of production. And the farming system consists not only of the farms, which grows fruits and vegetables, but also other type of farms, milk farms and so on, but also retailers, workers, labor intermediaries, processors, advisors who are in these regions. Obviously, before COVID-19, we already identified many challenges which are in place in this farming system, economic problems, especially with labor, with people, with successors and seasonal workers primarily, environmental problems with soil and water, and institutional problems with regulations and implementation of CAP, and also the organization of value chain. And what we found out during the COVID is those challenges in red. These are those which really aggravated or were revealed through the COVID situation. And obviously lack of seasonal workers, the problem aggravated due to lockdown and due to inflexible immigrant labor regulations which were in Poland. And the problem with poorly developed network of horizontal integration was aggravated due to lack of contracts between farmers and processors. And the poor organization of the markets also aggravated during the COVID situation due to lack of storage systems and cooperation among the farmers. So actually, we identified these challenges and asked our stakeholders how they coped with this. And there was interviews with farmers, grocery shops, retailers, and policymakers, and also with seasonal workers, especially from Ukraine, through interviews, but also by taking active action on internet fora. So yes, what's important is that COVID has both a positive impact, and let's see at this as well. Obviously for farmers, seeing higher prices for their products was a plus, especially that some of them increased by 100 or even more %, especially that was on beans and apples, and even more for those who were able to store their products. So they didn't perish. And for other actors, lower fuel prices was a big plus, and the decline was by 25%, so it was a real saving. Also increased understanding on how important are and how much we rely on foreign labor force, and how important are flexible permits and so on. Retailers benefited from exemptions from social insurance, and seasonal workers also benefited from higher wages. But of course, there is also a negative impact. What we've heard, I think, in Germany, and was this massive buying out of means of production. It was called early buying. Here was, I think, massive buying out. So some farmers just couldn't get it, and the others had the stocks which they couldn't use actually. So also due to closed borders, there was worry about seasonal workers, and a lack of products, especially of citrus fruit, all those important products. So grocery retailers didn't have their products they were selling. They had to rely on the domestic products. And for seasonal workers, the minus was the ban on traveling, of course, and problems with visas, and proving the tests that they are not COVID positive. So impact was actually evaluated on scale from 1, no impact, to 5, very large impact. For farmers and seasonal workers, it was lower impact. They scored 2. For retailers, it was at level 3. As for strategies in the farming system, main strategies for farmers was actually switching from direct buying to buying online. That was a mental change, we can say, because they were not so much used to it. So also it meant for them internet connections and changing the attitude. And also switching from less labor-intensive production, from more labor-intensive production to less labor-intensive production, and also to use mechanization. That was main changes, main strategies for farmers. For grocery retailers, the strategy was actually first to survive, and it was usually based on their savings, but also the strategy to use government income support in all kinds of forms, from exemptions and also direct income support. And for input sellers, the strategy was to sell more online, and but no regulations on run out of stocks. So actually they didn't regulate it. So they sell to whoever wanted to buy. And seasonal workers' strategy was at first like lobbying for special treatment for working visas, so to be able to come to Poland, and also following the government rules, because they all dependent on this regulations all the time. As for strategies outside of the farming system, government mainly applied various types of income support, exemptions or refunds for tests for COVID, for example, and regulations on work permits, and who pays for example, tests for COVID for the Ukrainian workers and other workers. So at first they put this burden on farmers, but later on they were reimbursing for testing. And labor intermediaries' strategy was intermediation between the seasonal workers and government, and like stressing how important are the flexible rules and adjusting the rules to the situation. And when I try to look into the resilience thinking, so what is clear is that COVID aggravated or revealed the underlying problems. So not COVID is such a problem. It's a problem obviously for health of the people, but in terms of farming system, the COVID actually underlined the other deeper problems. So deep problem was access to inputs, especially for labor and plant protection products, and management, that farmers' organizations of markets for fruit and vegetable is not sufficient, and the integration of horticulture farmers with processors is very weak. So no contracts, no stability in the exchange. So when I try to put it into the archetype thinking, the system thinking, the story is a bit like this, that COVID, of course, makes a pressure and threaten the income due to lockdown, income of farmers and of retailers, and put because of lockdown on inputs and on people. Okay, so government wants to fix that by addressing the income problem, giving direct support and refunds, and in this way it addresses income problem, but it doesn't addresses the problem of access to inputs and management. So it doesn't address the problem of inputs and especially of people. So when we look at this other arrow, is that if so that the real problems, and this is unintended consequence, is there is no incentives of such support, no incentives to develop the mechanization which would replace labor, and cooperation and flexibility of labor rules for incoming Ukrainian workers and so on. So in a sense, the fix that actually this archetype is called fixes that fail, because this fix helps some cover problem, which is income, but doesn't actually solve the underlying problem, doesn't solve the problem of access to inputs and of management of this organization of market and integration. And this is because the help is not targeted. It's like general, it's like addressing the problem which is on top, not on under. So basically the fixes which would work, so not fixes that fail, but fixes which work, would be for labor access, that would be support for mechanization, flexible employment rules, and so on. And for product access would be, for example, investments in IT, so there is more sale online, there is a more flexible shift, so there is no problem of this solding out quick, and that horizontal integration and market organization are fixed, because they are the problem for farmers, which are not working underline. So this is the way of thinking why this help may not be sufficient. So the conclusions are that COVID aggravated, of course, some problems and revealed which of those problems just become very urgent when the pandemic situation comes. And that is lack of labor force, market organization, reliance on foreign inputs, and poor horizontal integration. And due to pandemic, pressure increased on switching from labor-intensive production to more capital-intensive. Actually, the farmers already do this even without the support, but the support, of course, would help. And of course, there is also awareness and discussions on shortening food chains because of this situation. And the fix of government focuses on income support, not targeting those particular pressures. So they follow this archetype, fixes that fail. So it's quick fix, but not of the underlying problem, but of the current problem. And that means in short term, the income problem is solved in a sense, but not the long-term problems are still not addressed. So another pandemic or another situation will actually again be a big problem, because still nothing is fixed for a longer time. And COVID triggered reflections also on the need to accelerate IT development, both at farmer side, but also retailers, shop sellers, and so on. But also the IT problems on behalf of the government, of paying agencies. So they want to pay quickly the aid. They need also to be more digitalized and to ease implementation of CAP at farm level, and not only CAP, but also the aid, like this quick aid. And reflections on importance of domestic production. So this is pretty same what was in previous cases that we've heard today. Also in particular expand storage system, because horticulture are perishable products. So it's better also planning and management of the and organization of the markets, and so to avoid shortages of this input selling and this situation that early buying causes the problems for the others, so that it can be somehow managed and not getting into panic if there is online selling and people could observe the stocks, for example. And there are many solutions, but they were not in place so far. Okay, so that's actually the last presentation on the case study, and I would like to ask Miranda to again put it all into our resilience framework, so that we can think of this in systemic way after we've heard all these country presentations. Can you share your screen, Miranda?
Yes, happy to. Well, most of the things have been said. It should be easy for me now.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll take you through some summary slides, and then let's start the discussion. So also to give room for that. So I try to go a bit fast through the slides. So the summary of what we heard, but also from the other case studies involved in the Sure Farm project. So what we do in the project is probably what you have seen by now, is that we, in this COVID assessment, we look at these blue parts, which is what is the impact of the early stage of the lockdowns, and we look at that from the resilience perspective. And we also, that's also what you already heard from the different presenters. We try to understand these COVID situations using our knowledge from the systematic assessments that we did before the lockdowns. So you see in the red circle here, the lockdown, the early stage of the lockdowns. That's what we all talk about. We talk about consequences in that early stage of the lockdown. We have assessed exposure, sensitivity, impact, and we look at that from the resilience perspective. But we also try to understand it, and I've heard all speakers talk about it, okay, from all the knowledge that we had already before. So from this early systematic assessment. Well, most farming systems actually faced relatively minor exposure and sensitivity in this early stage of the lockdown, except for 3. And I know that I have 2 circles here. I can still count to 3, but I start with these 2. So you heard from Bárbara that in the Spanish Northeast sheep system, there was quite some exposure and sensitivity and impact, as well as in the Northeast mixed Romanian farming system. Also, a lot of things happening, and even though a lot of actions were taken, still impact in the end. There was also a lot of things going on in the Mazovian fruit and vegetable region in Poland, as we just heard from Kasia. But all in all, the actions taken there, well, led to, in the end, not such a big impact for the area. Nevertheless, you see this text only partly, I think, I wrote here that despite there's not everywhere a lot of impact, still we saw a lot of actions in all the farming systems. And from the actions taken, we can learn a lot, even though the impacts were sometimes a bit smaller. So a lot of actions that we can look at. Well, the next slide is about these 3 capacities that I mentioned before. And I stressed so much that anticipation, coping, and responsive actions are all very important. But you see here in the middle, what we all have seen in the early stage of the lockdowns, a lot of coping actions, both from the farming system that is in blue, as well as from the enabling environment. They stimulated a lot of coping, and I don't need to repeat the examples because we heard them lively from the presenters before. And of course, I'm aware that in this early stage of the lockdown, the time is very short to come up with anticipation and a lot of transition. Nevertheless, it's good to be aware that all this coping went on in that short time frame. There was, though, also adaptation, and we heard the examples from all the online actions, and so we heard some of these adaptation examples. But this is important to realize, I think. Okay, we have also heard about agency. Who takes agency here? Maybe you remember that I had this yellow block saying, okay, it's the farming system that is relevant, but also the enabling environment. But in many situations, both, hand in hand, take action together. But that's the green block here, the green part, farming system, as well as the enabling environment, take action together and take agency together. Okay. We've also heard, among others from Gordana, that there's a lot of reflections that emerged from this COVID situation. So many things happening, so many things that we could never realize and never expect beforehand happened. And it led to a lot of reflections. You see the different topics here. A lot of discussion about shorter change. That is the orange slide of the diagram here. Shorter change, less dependence on migrant labor, more self-sufficiency is needed. That's was one of the topics. More need for cooperation among farmers. So far, I only heard Franziska mentioning an example that really was then followed up. So I say here in the title, many reflections, but no follow-up. I think I've heard one concrete follow-up, which was in the slaughterhouses in Germany, where the subcontracting is not allowed anymore. So that was a concrete, there was a lot of discussion and it had a follow-up. But otherwise, you see all these discussions, you could say about very fundamental things, about attributes discussions. So really, okay, cooperation, more self-sufficiency. These are really fundamental issues of the design of our agricultural system. But there was little follow-up, except the example we heard from Franziska. Well, then it's also good to think, okay, this COVID lockdown, many things happening, but how does it relate back to what we learned from that, from these systematic analysis that we did before? Well, do you see then in these crisis situations, do you see the same challenges as before? Yeah, partly. And no, partly not. There's also extra challenges. So on the left-hand side, you see, challenges that we saw before re-emerge, like the price drops in the dairy sector in Flanders. The discussions about labor shortage, well, they emerged very prominently in a number of regions. They were there before, and they were again there. The third bullet may surprise you, because what did COVID-19 have to do with climate change? Well, a few words about that. There was so much stress about the COVID situation that discussions and yeah, reflections were there in different farming systems about, oh, if this can happen with COVID, well, climate change will be much worse. So that is why there was a lot of concern about climate change. Although in first instance, it doesn't relate to COVID. I thought it's still important to mention that this concern was there. We also say resilience is about dealing with many simultaneous shocks and uncertainties at the same time. And that is also what we saw in this COVID situation, that it led to extra challenges. So there was already a lot of things going on, but there were some additional challenges appearing. And also what we heard: financial distress, mental stress, collapse of agritourism, diversified activities in general. We never thought about that before. It was always supposed to be a safe site to do some extra activities on the farm, but now this was all collapsing. And additional to the challenges mentioned before were clearly the interrupted sales that we heard Bárbara talking about, and also Camelia about the Northeast Romanian system. So also this is good to realize that the same things show up again, but also additional challenges. Okay, then you can also think, if we saw certain capacities before the crisis, are they then the same? Do we see the same in terms of these resilience capacities? Largely, yes. I think implying that we understand a lot of the things going on. However, we don't understand the full pie yet. We don't understand the full picture yet. Because some farming systems were less responsive, others were more responsive. So we understand a lot about the capacities, but you see, if there is a quite unexpected situation, crisis situation, then things run differently, can run differently. A lot of text here. Don't read the right-hand part. That is for later on. If you go back to the slides, maybe you remember that I mentioned in my introduction that these attributes are the key building block, you could say, of resilience. These resilience attributes. I spent quite a few words about it. Well, then I try to assess from all what we see about actions taken during COVID and impact, and can we derive attributes that made the difference, that really helped in the end to either not being exposed, or to being not very sensitive, or to have little impact. And I've also heard actually the different presenters talking about it. So the very first one, I take that one out. Gordana, you mentioned it. You said it actually helped that we were not so much focused on export. And that is exactly from all the systematic analysis that we've done in together with you. We see, okay, your system is quite well linked, coupled to the national need. It is not so much focused on export. So that was a key decisive characteristic of your system that led in your case to being not so sensitive to all the things going on. Let me take out one more. The connectedness has been mentioned actually a number of times. Either there was good cooperation and that helped, or there was lack of cooperation, like we heard from Camelia, and that was again, it was before and it was again now during the COVID situation, hampering the small farmers being able to participate in these value chains when their own markets were closed, or they couldn't sell the normal way. The cooperation was also not there to get easily into the retail, for instance. So you see that these attributes help and explain either the little impact or the important impact. Well, conclusions. I think what we've seen in the end and heard from the different presentations, focus is on coping. Partly logical, because it's just a short time early stage of the lockdown that we looked at, but still good to realize. I think also, however, that seeds have been planted to discuss about resilience attributes. I showed that in my one but last slide, that where these have been very important. And I saw it in the reflections that we had in this overview of different reflection topics. And you probably not surprised about my third bullet, being in a project on resilience. I think we also learned that resilience is still a very important topic for two reasons. The left-hand side, that's our logo, but it also exactly reflects what we see. Resilience is not such a static, simple concept. It is dynamic. Because remember that slide where I said, okay, we understand the largest part of the pie, but still there is a few farming systems that are more responsive or less responsive than we expected. So maybe we don't understand the full picture yet, because it is rather dynamic and complex. And also I think resilience is an important topic because we saw that there is these challenges that are accumulating, and that is yet another challenge added to that farming system, which is already, and that is my last link back to my introduction, struggling, facing almost these critical points, and these struggles that I mentioned on that first slide with the low level of resilience. With that, I hope that it was some summary, and that this feeds into further discussions, and to keep the topic on resilience in the focus, I would say. Thanks a lot, and let's open the floor for discussion.
Yes, thank you, Miranda. Thank you very much. This was excellent wrapping up of so many issues that were raised. Yes, thank everybody who put the question on chat. We have now several questions, both general and specific for presenters as they went. So yeah, first question to Miranda, second to Bárbara, then to Franziska. If you could address, I don't know if you see them or I can read them. Or...
So I should scroll up all the way up?
Yes, it's from the top. Yeah, the question to Miranda was, who is supposed to be?
Oh yeah, I can see you don't need to read. Yeah, so the long-term vision, well, we see it as a requirement for policymakers. That's the, if the policies are changing too frequently and you can't pinpoint where you're going, how can you then invest in these infrastructures for diversity and for having diverse access to labor, and if you don't have that long-term vision from the government, you cannot make your own long-term vision.
Is it sufficient, Wawrzyniec, for you? Because you put this question.
Okay, the following question is for me. What I understand as you're asking why the reserves were active just when the COVID crisis took place. I think that I agree with you that maybe the situation pre-COVID, that I said, the situation pre-COVID was difficult. The sector was about to collapse. So once the government, the cooperatives saw that a new shock arrived to the sector, they decided to react, and there were a lot of reactions. This is maybe this is why in our case study we saw so many reactions, because the situation was very vulnerable. So actors knew that there were need to react. So this is why all people involved in the sector decided to move and decided to get these trade deals to help the sector to cope with this new shock. And also something that is related with the reserves of the sector is that the sector is coupled with natural resources, because we are talking about extensive sector, and the sector at that moment was the advantage that it was a really rainy winter. It was a really rainy winter, so the pastures were very productive. and lambs were able to pasture the pasture land, so the cost assumed by the farmers were lower than they used to be. So I agree with you that I think that the vulnerable situation pre-COVID explained why the resources, the resource of the farming system react in this way and help the farming system to cope with COVID.
Okay, thank you very much. And there were 2 questions on Germany and actually some discussions also underlying on the chat. So Franziska, can you refer to that?
So I think they were just not really discussion. There were some questions and I already tried to answer. So the first was from
Katarzyniec?
Yeah, it's from me.
On the border.
Okay, sorry. So it was if the earlier purchase of seeds and fertilizer had some price impacts. I hadn't had a look on in the statistics, but so from what we get from the farmers and from the interviews, there were no significant impact, and I didn't heard of this. There were no shortage. The other was on foreign laborers. So usually the Altmark is not really depending on seasonal labor, so the impact here is really minor. We don't have like fruits and vegetables to harvest, or these larger slaughterhouse. They also depend on maybe foreign laborers, are also not in our case study. We have farming areas that are dependent on seasonal labors, but I think they are mainly from Romania and Bulgaria. In our region, we have some milkers from Poland, but they are usually not only seasonal. They usually are there for longer or even settle in this region. And there was a specific question on workers from Ukraine, and I am not aware of that. So sorry, I don't have the exact numbers here.
Okay, that's okay. We have questions also to Camelia.
Yes, I saw that. Well, my answer is the following: large farms are generally, so those one especially more than 50 or 100 hectares, they are very much specialized, especially on crops, and I mean by that cereals and oilseeds. So COVID did not, let's say, had a major impact, because the winter crops, winter wheat and barley were already sown from the fall, and the spring crops, and I mean by that sunflower and maize were already prepared. Generally, these large farms have important storage facilities, and they use them also for storing inputs, and they are not relying on last minute transports for buying these necessary inputs. So they are also very much mechanized, so no problem linked to the manual labor. There was at a certain moment, just at the very beginning of the lockdown, there was one problem. The government enforced for 1 week a ban on exports, on cereal exports, of course, to non-EU countries, but it was removed. That ban was removed a week later, because the large farmers and the important exporters protested, in the sense that they said that they have already contracts on of export and paid transportation means. I mean, ships and all sorts of stuff like that. And it would incur them huge losses. So the government just forgot about it, eliminated the ban. But in general, very large farms did not have any major impacts from COVID.
Okay. Thank you, Camelia.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Okay, there is also a question on Poland specifically, and then I will return to general questions. So the question on Poland was because I explained that the low cooperation was one of the problems which were specifically came up during COVID, when this cooperation would be very much appreciated. And the question is if we actually noticed a better cooperation between the farmers. And the answer is unfortunately no, we did not. And this is what Miranda said, that there are so few follow-up actions. So also nothing was done to increase this cooperation. It didn't come up naturally either. So no, unfortunately not yet. And no measures were taken to improve it. So lessons were noticed but not learned, or maybe learned but not followed up, following Miranda's reasoning. So there is also a question to Miranda specifically, and then we will go to general questions. So Miranda, to you was also a specific question about to have this insight from project. Do you think that it is going to be redesigned, the adaptive system of each country, in order to see where is each country now compared to what we had in 2019?
So guys, I see multiple more general questions.
Right.
Should I go through them one by one, or how do you want to do this?
Yes, maybe please go one by one. Yeah.
So the first one is from Sergi, right? At 12:45.
I see something on 12:09 from Victor was about
earlier even.
Yeah, this is the first one to you specific again.
The long one.
No. You said about the need of investment for better farming system resilience. What do you mean? Additional money or funds?
Oh, yeah. I see it. Yeah, good question. So let me see. Where is Sergi? Can I see you?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can switch on your camera.
Yes, just a moment.
Very nice, because this is a difficult question. So what do you mean? Money?
I think
it comes with investment and spending resources on these attributes or on these reflection points that came up in this COVID early stage discussions. It comes with investment for sure and spending resources. But it's also a discussion point for the other partners in the Shore Farm project. Is it only investment and resources, or is it also maybe a bit of a mindset? But yeah, in the end, mindset comes with investment and money available. So what is a chicken or egg here? I think that an important starting point is spending resources and shifting away from spending them on efficiency to maybe a bit less efficient, but more in balance with what the locals need, like a bit what happened in Sweden with the poultry system, or like all these discussions coming up in the COVID crisis. Chains need to be shorter. Same was in Italy. They produce hazelnuts for the whole of the world. Why do we do that? Why are we not producing food for the locals a bit more than having these hazelnuts going to Ferrero, having chocolate pasta all over the world? Having, I think, the same question for the Netherlands. Do we produce starch potato as starch exported all over the place. Why do we do that? So that's all efficiency driven and productivity driven. So yeah, if you say, does it come at resources? It's not easy to change the resource stream from efficiency to a bit more resilience, but I think that's what we recommend. Yeah. So very good question.
Thank you very much.
A very difficult one also, but that's resilience is not an easy topic, and we have all so much learned to think about efficiency and to think about. Franziska is really good in explaining this. That Franziska knows a lot about mental models, and she keeps on pointing me, saying, Miranda, this is also so difficult for people who have been trained in efficiency. We all want to hang on to what we have, so it's so difficult to change. It's also for us as in a personal situation.
Especially if you talk to farmers, and we talk during the project a lot with farmers and some participatory workshops, seminars, and so on. They have their mindset focusing on income and on their efficiency on this function of the farming system, and so no matter how you structure your seminar and what question you ask, it feels that you always end up to this question. And I think like these sudden shocks like COVID opens a bit more the mindset also to others. And I think this could also be perfectly related to the next question from Yuko. If this is easier to respond to a sudden shock compared to like these long-term challenges. I would say partly because, as Miranda presented, there were some reflections, or many reflections, but no specific follow-ups up to now, or no really major follow-ups that really deals with the problems that we became aware of. Maybe the time frame to really assess the success of some follow-ups is a bit too short, because it would usually take time, and COVID is not over now. Yes, I think this is still an issue, and I don't think that even response to a sudden shock is easy and better possible. But I think it's even you're so used to the permanent challenges, and so maybe this is also a chance to get some action there, or to change the mindset.
Thank you for your answer. I was kind of fishing for the conclusion that COVID was just such a quick and powerful shock that everybody kind of woke up. But these long-going, slowly worsening situations may not give such a wake-up call that they might go unnoticed. And if we think of resilience, I think these problems are also very important. I was kind of wondering if you have thought of this kind of division of problems in your project.
Yeah, Yoko, I think it's this was an enormous wake-up call. But then over summer, most of the restrictions were lowered, and then oops, in September it was yet another shock, because it came back, and we again had to run around to find all the things. And Franziska also says it very rightly. Maybe the time is also too short to say this was a wake-up call that leads to substantial changes. But man, it's so difficult because of the things that we just heard. We all trained in efficiency. The farmers think in income and efficiency. And of course, there should be income, no doubt about that. But making substantial changes is the most difficult question, not only for the farming systems, but for all of us, including our personal lives. It is so difficult. We all do what we do.
May I add
very philosophical at 1 o'clock, Kasia?
Yes, but let's. I think there are like 3 more questions. So, and mostly to you, Miranda. So, if you could address them quickly. Yeah, you answered Yoko's question. It's Christina's question.
Do you think it's going to be redesigned in adaptive system of each country? Christina, where are you? Can you maybe switch on your camera? Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a bit about what we just discussed. Yes, there was a wake-up call. Yes, there were discussions, but man, it's so difficult to make the change. And that's what I had on the last slide, that seeds have been planted to think about these resilience attributes. But then we had the question from Sergej. So we need resources for this. And then yet there's another difficulty. So I don't have the answer here.
But you would like to.
Yeah, do you see it from my face? I wished, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Go for it. Congratulations. And I would like to thank you for this opportunity to see what you have done since we met last year. So it's a great pleasure to see how we are standing now.
Yeah, it's a good group with all critical thinkers. So that is
Okay,
Andrzej?
last question. I think last question from Andrzej Kwieciński from OECD. Yes.
Andrzej, I also see you. If COVID leads to self-sufficiency, it could undermine global food security, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think that Andrzej know of these farming systems thought about really going to complete self-sufficiency, but a bit more than I think about my extreme examples of the hazelnuts being produced in Lazio region around Rome for everywhere. And we do that in the Netherlands with a lot of products. And so I wouldn't think that we all go completely back to our own local for local. No, that's not happening. But a bit more. Think also about the migrant labor. There are so many regions which already face these problems with lack of labor. Franziska can also tell a lot about that. Different types of labor are very important. So don't say that we have to solve it all with our locals, but a bit more balanced. That would already be good. And no, not advocating a full go back local for local situation. Would you agree with that, Andrzej?
Only partly.
Go ahead.
I must say I'm rather now disconnected from all these scientific discussions. What I know now is mostly based on TV news, newspapers, and so on. I do not do any research anymore. But what I see, for example, in France, I'm now living in France, is quite strong drive for this local production, for local labor, for relocation of production, not only for agriculture, but for many other commodities as well. And I'm afraid of this. I used to work a lot on developing countries in the past. And from the perspective of developing countries, this situation looks completely different. They need our markets in Europe, in the United States, in developed countries. They need these markets for development, for growing incomes, and for many other reasons. And if Europe and other, let's say, OECD countries lock their market to some extent, trying to produce more locally, it would undermine development prospects for other countries. So my preference is to look beyond locality, you look beyond national markets to have somewhat larger perspective. And also, I think it was in the presentation from Spain that farmers also need export markets. And I was quite positively surprised that even small-scale producers or local producers in Spain, they are looking for export opportunities. And this is exactly what is needed. It's rather looking for linkages and looking for new prospects, new opportunities, rather than locking down in very, very local types of thinking. And my reaction is exclusively that I would not like to see the conclusions from your work that self-sufficiency or any steps towards self-sufficiency is by definition something positive.
No, don't worry about that. We see this export and linkages in all our farming systems. For instance, also the French beef system that we looked at, and you mentioning France, they survived during the first stage of the lockdown because the export to Italy remained open. Indeed, the Spanish sheep system managed to find Saudi Arabia as a new export market. So no worries. It's reflection on situations where it became too extreme, too much focused on a market which is half a world away. So we will not recommend self-sufficiency. No, don't worry. We see all these evidence that it is connected. Connectedness is one of the things that is also important. Yeah, good reflection there.
Yeah, but also look at prices, because also from the France perspective, and there was a period then international supplies were interrupted, and there was stronger reliance, in particular in Paris area, on local production of fruit and vegetables, and prices of fruit and vegetables quite importantly increased in Paris. So it's not only a question of availability, but at what price, and who is able to have to pay higher prices. So there is also a distributional effect of and locality thinking, and not looking from somewhat broader perspective. But this is
that is all good. And maybe then I try to see if Kasia wants to stop. Then I'll make a short sentence. Andrej, I agree. We looked from the farming system perspective, which is a bit of a regional perspective, because you have to set the boundaries somewhere when you want to understand a region in detail. And your comment is also a bit more macro level.
Mm-hmm.
But good reflections.
Thank you. I have to stop here. I mean, Gordana raised the hand, and we also have one question unanswered by Victor. I will refer to this question. What was your Gordana's point?
It was just a comment about the self-sufficiency. It's very much on in Sweden, but it's not about like excluding the country from the rest of the world. It's about the conditions, under which conditions the trade will appear, what's going to be traded. And here it's very much linked to the climate policy and environmental policies, like importing beef meat from Brazil that comes from areas that devastate forest and so. So it's very much about what to be traded and under what kind of conditions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Victor's question was about if this government help, which sometimes it's local tax exemptions or local budget is affected. So actually, it may be more harmful than helping. I don't think it was the case here in Poland. I understood this was the case in Ukraine. So this is also example of fixes that fail. Yes, a kind of archetype of system thinking when the help is actually not helping, but at least helping only selected people and not actually solves the problem. So as you put here, Victor, that it's a longer discussion and you're happy to discuss it even after the the seminar. I don't know if any of the countries discussed here had experienced that the local budget was affected by the COVID help. I don't think so. So probably we cannot share with you the particular examples, but it's good to know that it happened in Ukraine. Thank you for raising this issue. Okay, so I think we ran out of time a bit, but for the sake of very good discussion, so I would like to thank all the presenters, all the participants for being here, for asking questions, and this presentations will be available. And last but not least, we would like to invite you for tomorrow event, which is also on COVID, and our Romanian partners, Institute of Agriculture Economics Romanian Academy, and also we will be also present at this conference. It's tomorrow, and the link, you cannot remember the link, but if you are interested, just please give us an email and you will be invited. It's about sustainability and resilience of the agriculture sector in rural areas in the current challenges. So it's tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much. And yes, you can switch on cameras to see you and say goodbye. And many thanks, everybody.